What if I told you that the reason you're struggling to study consistently isn't because you're lazy or unmotivated? It's not about willpower, and it's certainly not about finding the right study methods. The truth is far more shocking and profound. What's really holding you back is your identity. You don't see yourself as the kind of person who studies consistently, and that is why you're stuck in a cycle of procrastination and burnout. Let me explain how this one simple shift in how you see yourself can transform your study habits forever. Welcome to the Quiet Discipline Method, where we break through the noise and dive deep into the mindset shifts that lead to lasting success. If you're tired of feeling overwhelmed by your exams, I promise this video will help you unlock the real key to mastering your studies, and it's simpler than you think. So, if you haven't already, make sure to hit subscribe to stay updated with more transformative tips that will guide you toward excellence in every aspect of life. Now, back to the shocking truth. Think about it. How many times have you promised yourself you'll start studying only to end up on your phone, watching random videos, or putting it off until the night before the exam? We've all been there. The reality is, even when the exam is fast approaching, we often find ourselves scrambling at the last minute to catch up. It's stressful, overwhelming, and leads to burnout, right? But what if I told you that there's a way to escape this vicious cycle? A way to break free from the guilt of procrastination and the chaos of cramming last minute? The secret is consistency, but not in the way you might think. It's not about forcing yourself to sit down and study every day. It's about changing how you identify yourself as a student. You see, behavior that is inconsistent with your self-image will never last. If you see yourself as a procrastinator, someone who can never seem to get started, that's exactly how you'll behave. But when you change your identity, from someone who tries to study to someone who naturally prioritizes learning, your actions will follow suit. This was a huge turning point for me when I first read Atomic Habits by James Clear. I had been struggling with staying focused and consistent no matter how hard I tried. But when I went deeper into the book, I came across a profound realization. Behavior change is rooted in identity change. If you want to lose weight, don't just focus on the diet. See yourself as a healthy person, not someone constantly fighting against cravings. If you want to study every day, start by viewing yourself as a dedicated student, not someone who pulls all-nighters or crams the night before an exam. Let me give you a personal example. When I was preparing for my internal medicine board exam, I wasn't just trying to study hard. I began to view myself as someone who consistently studies, no excuses. And once I truly embraced this identity, my habits naturally shifted. I stopped making excuses and instead found myself more motivated to stick to my study routine. This shift didn't happen overnight, but once it did, everything else fell into place. So how do you start? Begin by adopting the identity of the kind of person you want to be. If you want to be a great student, start telling yourself, I am a person who studies regularly. Believe that you are capable of focusing and committing to your studies every day. Because once you believe this, your habits will follow. Before we dive deeper into how you can implement these changes, I want to ask you a quick question. Which of these two identities do you identify with? A, I am someone who struggles to stay focused and often procrastinates. B, I am someone who makes studying a priority and sticks to it consistently. Leave your answer in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And remember, shifting your identity is the first step toward achieving long-term success in anything you do. If you found this valuable, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more tips on building habits that will propel you toward your goals. You're not just here to pass an exam, you're here to build a life of discipline, consistency, and achievement. And it all starts with the quiet discipline of transforming how you see yourself. In the journey of improving your study habits, one of the most powerful realizations comes when you understand the crucial role your identity plays. We often think that the key to success lies in motivation or sheer willpower, but that the truth is far deeper. The foundation of lasting change, especially when it comes to your study habits, lies in something more profound: your identity. If you want to consistently study for exams, you must first see yourself as someone who studies regularly and effectively. This is where true transformation begins. When I first encountered James Clear's Atomic Habits, I was intrigued by the idea that behavior change doesn't start with external factors like motivation or external rewards, but with something much more internal: your self identity. This concept hit me hard the second time I read the book, and it fundamentally changed my approach to studying. I realized that in order to succeed at anything, you have to shift the way you perceive yourself. You cannot simply try to follow a new behavior. You need to internalize it as part of your identity. Think about it. If you want to pass your exams with flying colors, it's not enough to just plan and study hard the night before. Instead, you need to believe that you are a consistent learner, someone who makes study a natural, everyday activity. This is where the power of identity change comes into play. For instance, if you want to be healthier, don't just focus on dieting or exercising for a few weeks. Instead, adopt the identity of someone who lives a healthy lifestyle, and naturally, your habits will align with that new self-image. When I reflected on my own struggles with consistency, whether it was in my studies, my health, or even my YouTube channel, I noticed a recurring theme. I had been trying to change my habits without changing how I saw myself. For example, when I was trying to lose weight, I still thought of myself as someone who loved unhealthy foods like chocolate chips and ice cream. My old identity of someone who indulged in sweets always pulled me back into old habits. But when I shifted my identity to seeing myself as someone who prioritizes health, the actions followed. Similarly, in the context of studying, I often found myself cramming the night before exams. But once I began to see myself as a dedicated, consistent learner, someone who doesn't wait until the last minute to study, the act of studying became something I did consistently, not just something I tried to do. The shift in self-identity was subtle but incredibly powerful. Instead of fighting against procrastination, I embraced the idea that I was the type of person who commits to studying regularly. This internal shift removed the need for constant willpower because studying had become part of who I was. When you begin to identify as a focused, disciplined student, the pressure of willpower and motivation fades away. You no longer have to force yourself to study. It becomes something you do because it's simply who you are. The challenge isn't about making yourself sit down at the desk every day. It's about shifting your perception of yourself so that the behavior naturally follows. You will no longer see studying as a struggle, but as a natural expression of your identity. Changing your identity requires consistency, patience, and reflection. It's not enough to say, I am a consistent learner one day and expect results immediately. You must prove it to yourself daily through small actions. But over time, as you show up and study regularly, even in the smallest of ways, your brain begins to believe it. And that belief in your new identity strengthens your habits, making them stick. So how do you start this process of identity transformation? Begin by asking yourself one simple question. What kind of person do I want to be? If you want to be a consistent learner, then see yourself as someone who values learning, who makes study a priority, and who follows through consistently. The more you identify as this person, the more natural the actions will become. In essence, it's about changing your internal narrative. Instead of saying, I'll study tomorrow, say, I am someone who studies every day, and that is who I am. When you internalize this new identity, the habits will follow. And that's when the real transformation begins, not just in your study habits, but in your life as a whole. One of the most significant barriers to maintaining focus and consistency when studying is the environment in which we place ourselves. While we often focus on our internal struggles, such as lack of motivation or discipline, what we often overlook is how much our surroundings shape our behavior. If you truly want to master the art of studying and build habits that last, you must first understand that your environment plays a massive role in your ability to stay on track. In his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear emphasizes that the environment you create is often the key to long-term success, not just willpower alone. The environment doesn't just refer to the physical space where you study, but to the stimuli and distractions that exist around you. And while many people believe that building self-control or grit is the way to succeed, the reality is that people who excel at self-control don't rely on their willpower nearly as much as others. Instead, they set themselves up for success by designing their environment in a way that eliminates unnecessary distractions. Imagine you're sitting down to study for an exam, and your phone is lying on the desk, just a few inches away from your hand. Every time a notification pops up, your mind is drawn to it, and you are constantly fighting the urge to check it. This is what CLEAR refers to as a cue, an unconscious trigger that disrupts your focus. The problem is that every time you resist checking your phone, you're still expending energy to ignore the urge. This internal battle can be exhausting, and it erodes your ability to stay focused on the task at hand. What many people don't realize is that the more often you expose yourself to temptation, the harder it becomes to resist. And no amount of self-discipline can completely remove the strain of constantly fighting against environmental cues. The solution, then, is simple. Remove the cues. By altering your environment in such a way that it no longer triggers distractions, you make it much easier to stay focused. For example, if you find yourself constantly reaching for your phone while studying, one simple fix is to remove it entirely from your study space. Put it in another room, or, at the very least, turn it off and place it out of sight. By doing this, you're eliminating the external triggers that force your brain to make a decision about whether or not to give in to temptation. This act of removing the distraction doesn't require any additional willpower. It's a straightforward environmental change that ensures you stay focused on your work without having to constantly battle against your impulses. This concept extends beyond just phones. If you are trying to focus on studying for your exams, your environment should reflect your study goals. You could make your study space more inviting by eliminating clutter and ensuring everything you need is within arm's reach. The less time you spend looking for materials or getting distracted by unnecessary objects, the more focused you'll be on the task at hand. Similarly, a quiet space, free from distractions such as background noise or interruptions, can drastically improve your concentration and productivity. However, the idea of creating a productive environment doesn't just end with removing distractions. It also means adding elements that promote good habits. For instance, setting out your study materials the night before so they are ready for the next day makes it much easier to dive into your study session. By preparing your environment ahead of time, you lower the friction that often leads to procrastination. You're not wasting time deciding where to start. Everything is already laid out for you. In the end, building a successful study routine isn't just about forcing yourself to work harder. It's about recognizing how much your surroundings influence your behavior and taking steps to craft an environment that supports your goals. Creating an environment that fosters focus and eliminates distractions helps you stay consistent with your study habits and ensures you don't fall into the trap of procrastination. By designing your space to align with your objectives, you can work smarter, not harder, and significantly increase your chances of success. The environment is the silent architect of our behaviors. It shapes how we think, how we act, and how we succeed. If you want to transform your study habits, start by transforming the space around you. Remove the distractions, eliminate the cues, and surround yourself with what will help you thrive. This is how you set yourself up for success without relying solely on willpower. When we think about building habits, especially the kind of habits that will help us succeed in our studies, we often imagine the need for constant motivation, sheer willpower, and relentless discipline. But here's the hard truth. Relying on willpower alone to create lasting habits is a recipe for failure. Willpower is finite. It's a resource that we can exhaust, especially when faced with temptation or overwhelming tasks. The real key to consistency, especially when it comes to studying for exams, is to build habits that are so easy and automatic that they require minimal effort to maintain. This is where the concept of making it easy comes into play. James Clear introduces a powerful strategy in Atomic Habits called the 2-minute rule, a simple but profound approach to habit formation. The rule is this: if a habit takes less than 2 minutes to do, you are much more likely to stick with it. This isn't about doing a perfect version of the habit. It's about making the habit so small, so easy, that you can't help but start it. The beauty of this strategy lies in its simplicity and effectiveness. Take, for example, the task of studying. If the thought of studying for an exam feels overwhelming, the 2-minute rule suggests you break it down into something so small it's almost too easy to ignore. Instead of saying, I'll study for 5 hours today, try this. I'll open my book and read one page. Or instead of thinking, I need to study every day for hours, you might start by telling yourself, I'll just sit at my desk for 2 minutes. You might be thinking, what's the point of studying for just 2 minutes? But here's the secret. The power of this approach is that it removes the friction of starting. Once you sit down at your desk for those 2 minutes, you'll often find that you naturally continue beyond the initial time. It's the same with going to the gym. The hardest part isn't the workout itself, but the decision to actually go. But when you tell yourself you'll just put on your workout clothes and go for a 2-minute jog, you're almost always going to end up doing more. The key is that you've removed the overwhelming nature of the task and replaced it with something manageable, a small action that sets you up for bigger success. This principle works not just for studying, but for any habit you want to build, whether it's exercise, reading, or even learning a new language. The beauty of the 2-minute rule is that it works by reinforcing your new identity. Every time you take a small action that aligns with your desired habit, no matter how small, it's like casting a vote for the person you want to become. You're telling your brain, this is who I am. For instance, instead of being a person who procrastinates, you become someone who studies regularly. The action of sitting down and opening your book for just 2 minutes is enough to trigger the mental shift. The more you do this, the more it reinforces the identity of being a consistent, focused learner. Over time, these small actions build up, creating momentum and reinforcing the new behavior until studying becomes a natural part of your routine. The key takeaway here is that habit formation doesn't need to be a massive, life-altering event. In fact, it's often the smallest changes that lead to the greatest results. By starting with something so simple and easy, you're giving yourself the best possible chance to succeed. The act of beginning, even in the smallest way, is often the hardest part, but once you get started, the rest tends to follow. The 2-minute rule also takes advantage of something called the aggregation of marginal gains, a principle that suggests small, consistent improvements can add up to significant long-term change. By committing to these tiny, almost effortless actions every day, you'll be surprised by how quickly they accumulate, transforming your study habits and your life in the process. In the end, it's about consistency, not perfection. By making studying so easy to start, you'll eventually make it easier to do consistently. And when studying becomes something that feels natural and easy to maintain, you will have successfully built a habit that leads to exam success without relying on constant willpower or motivation. It's the quiet, consistent actions that pave the way for real transformation. One of the most underestimated elements of building lasting study habits is tracking your progress. We often get caught up in the hustle of our daily tasks and forget to acknowledge the small victories along the way. But here's the truth. Tracking your habits not only boosts motivation, but also creates a powerful feedback loop that propels you toward your goals. It's not just about marking off another day of studying. It's about recognizing the small wins that accumulate and lead to monumental changes over time. When you track your study habits, you're doing more than just keeping a log. You're giving yourself a visual representation of your progress. Think about how satisfying it feels to check off an item on your to-do list. That small action, while seemingly insignificant, actually triggers a psychological response in your brain. It gives you a sense of accomplishment, of progress. This feeling is what drives you to continue working towards your goals. As Clear mentions in Atomic Habits, this sense of satisfaction is critical in reinforcing habits, and the more you track, the more you solidify the identity of someone who is consistent, dedicated, and goal-oriented. Tracking doesn't just motivate you in the short term, though. It also creates a feedback loop. When you see your progress visually, whether it's through a habit tracker or a simple checklist, it serves as a reminder of how far you've come. This keeps you engaged and committed to your journey because you begin to realize that the work you're doing every day is not in vain. For example, When you look back at the streak of days you've studied, you can see that your efforts are adding up. Each checkmark or note you make on your tracker is a reaffirmation that you are on the right path. This feedback loop works because it taps into one of the most basic principles of human psychology, the desire for progress and growth. We all want to feel like we're moving forward, like our actions are having a tangible impact. Tracking your study habits gives you that sense of direction. And as you begin to see patterns and improvements over time, it boosts your self-esteem and confidence. You realize that you are capable of making lasting changes, even in areas that once felt overwhelming. Beyond motivation, habit tracking also gives you valuable insights into your behavior. You might be surprised at how often you underestimate the time or effort you're putting into studying. By tracking consistently, you can see where you might be slacking off or where you need to adjust. Maybe you're spending more time procrastinating than you thought, or perhaps you're neglecting certain subjects that need more attention. With this information, you can make more informed decisions about how to adjust your study routine and optimize your habits for success. Another powerful aspect of tracking your habits is that it can help prevent burnout. It's easy to push yourself too hard when you don't see the immediate results of your efforts, and that's when burnout tends to creep in. But when you track your progress, you can take a step back and see how much you've actually accomplished. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by what you still need to do, you'll be able to appreciate how much you've already achieved, which can help you maintain balance and avoid the exhaustion that often leads to giving up. To make tracking as effective as possible, it's important to keep it simple and consistent. You don't need to track every little detail, but just marking down key milestones or habits can have a huge impact. For example, you could write down the hours you spent studying, the chapters you completed, or even how focused you felt during each session. By focusing on the most important aspects of your study routine, you can keep the tracking process simple while still reaping the benefits. In the long run, tracking your habits does more than just help you stay on course. It helps you become the kind of person who takes their goals seriously and who shows up every day and commits to making progress, no matter how small. The act of tracking is a form of accountability, not just to others, but to yourself. It forces you to acknowledge your efforts and results, giving you the motivation and confidence to keep moving forward. As you continue to track your study habits and see your progress, remember that the journey is just as important as the destination. It's not about perfection, it's about consistent improvement. And by making habit tracking a part of your study routine, you're setting yourself up for long-term success, not just in passing your exams, but in every area of your life. With each check mark and each small victory, you are not just becoming a better student, you're becoming someone who consistently takes action, builds habits, and achieves their goals. In conclusion, creating lasting study habits requires more than just motivation. It requires a shift in identity, an environment that supports focus, and a systematic approach to making small, consistent actions. By tracking your progress and focusing on gradual improvement, you transform your daily actions into a reflection of who you want to be, a disciplined, consistent learner. The real secret to success lies not in the big leaps, but in the small, intentional steps that accumulate over time. The lesson here is that success isn't about perfection, but about persistence and consistency. You don't need to overhaul your entire routine at once. Start small. Change how you see yourself, design your environment for success, and track your progress. These small changes compound over time, leading to lasting transformation in both your studies and your life. How do you plan to start making small changes today? Comment below with your thoughts, and let's share ideas on how we can all improve our study habits together. And don't forget to hit subscribe to support the channel so I can continue bringing you more content that helps you achieve your goals.